If you're a parent of an autistic child, I'm sure one of the questions that's always on your mind is, will my child talk? And why is their path with language so unique? Well, today, we're going to dive into the science behind that exact journey. We'll look at some really surprising clues from a child's first year, and then explore this fascinating technique that literally builds a bridge between saying and doing. So, where do we even start with a question that big? Well, the first thing to get our heads around is that there is no single, simple answer. Language skills and autism exist on this huge, wide spectrum. You have some kids who are incredibly fluent, others who are minimally verbal, and some who don't use spoken language at all. And that variability, that's really one of the defining features of the autism spectrum. To really get a handle on this spectrum, a massive study looked at the language skills in a big group of kids when they were 3 years old. And what they found gives us a really crucial starting point for understanding where these differences come from. And yeah, the data here is pretty striking. What you're seeing is that on average, kids who were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, had lower language scores at age 3 compared to their peers. This just confirms what many parents see firsthand, that a measurable language gap is often already there by that age. Okay, so when you see a gap like that at age 3, it makes you wonder, right? Can we see this coming? Are there clues, maybe in the very first year of life, that can help us predict where a child's language skills might be headed? This is where the research gets really, really insightful. So, researchers started tracking these kids, looking for clues when they were just 12 months old. I mean, they measured everything you can think of: motor skills, cognitive abilities, you name it. And out of all of that data, just 2 things really stood out as powerful predictors for kids who would later get an ASD diagnosis. First up was maternal education. As you can see from this chart, for the kids with ASD, the ones whose moms had a college degree or higher tended to have much stronger language scores later on. So what this tells us is that the home environment, things like access to resources and just being surrounded by a rich landscape of language, plays a huge role. All right, let's get to that second big predictor, a child's use of gestures at 12 months. And folks, this is where the findings get, well, pretty wild. So, the researchers were smart about this. They didn't just lump all gestures together. Nope, they split them into 2 kinds. You have early gestures, which are the simple, direct ones we all know, like pointing or waving. And then you have late gestures, which are more complex, more symbolic, like pretending to drink from a cup or putting a hand to your ear like a telephone. And here is the curveball, the totally unexpected twist. For most kids, more gestures usually means better language down the road. But for the babies who were later diagnosed with ASD, the opposite was true. Having more of those complex, symbolic, late gestures at 1-year-old actually predicted weaker language skills at age 3. Just let that sink in for a moment. So, what in the world is going on here? Well, the leading theory is pretty fascinating. It's that these infants are basically brilliant adapters. Spoken language isn't coming as easily to them, so they're developing this really rich, nonverbal way to communicate. They're leaning on what works for them, gestures, to try and make up for that emerging gap with words. Okay, so knowing these predictors is one thing. It's powerful. But what can we do about it? Can we go beyond just predicting and actually intervene? Well, a really fascinating study looked at a technique that does just that. It connects the world of words directly to the world of actions. The technique is called script fading. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like using training wheels for sentences. You give a child all the support they need to say something, and then, little by little, you remove that support until they can just pedal on their own. Let me walk you through how it works. A child is shown a picture, let's say, of someone brushing their teeth, and they're given the full sentence, brush your front teeth. Then, in the next step, a word is taken away, brush your, and the child fills in the blank. You keep doing this until all the words are gone, and the child can just look at the picture and say the whole sentence all by themselves. And, they weren't just using this for random phrases. The researchers applied this method to super practical, everyday stuff. They created these scripts for things like putting on a mask, washing your hands, or even the steps for playing with a Mr. Potato Head toy. And the results? For just teaching the verbal part of the skill, it was an absolute home run, 100% success. Every single child in the study learned to independently say the sentences that went with the pictures. That's amazing, right? But believe it or not, that's not even the coolest part. And this is the real game changer, the mind-blowing part. Once these kids mastered saying the steps, like put toothpaste on the toothbrush, they could suddenly do those steps without anyone ever physically showing them how. The words literally became the instruction manual for the action. It's something researchers call say-do correspondence. So we've covered a lot of science here, from prediction to intervention. What's the bottom line for parents? What are the big takeaways from all of this? First off, that early nonverbal communication, it is a huge deal. It gives you powerful clues about your child's developmental path. Second, never forget that deep, deep connection between saying something and doing something. Language isn't just for chatting. It's a tool for organizing our actions in the world. And finally, and this is the most important part, know that strategies like script fading actually work. They're evidence-based ways to build these powerful bridges between communication and real-world skills. In the end, this research does more than just give us answers. It gives us a really hopeful new way to think. It pushes us all to ask a much better question. Not just if a child will communicate, but how can we, as parents, therapists, and educators, get creative and systematically build more of these incredible bridges between their words and their world?